Hey everybody, welcome to week 2 of your app design course. It's Mr. Smith again. Thanks for turning in your work last week. I'll be going through that and you'll be getting your grades soon. So let's move on to week 2. And in week 2, we're going to be talking about different kinds of apps. You've got an article that I'm going to have you read that's going to sort of loosely describe different apps, mainly in terms of their functionality. But I wanted to talk with you today about 3 types of apps in terms of the mechanics of the way that they work. And you're going to be responsible to understand this stuff. And of course, there's going to be some of your classwork this week is going to involve identifying these apps in the wild, so to speak. So the first kind of app that I want to talk to you about is maybe the one you're most used to, or at least that you realize you're the most used to. And those are called native apps, okay? Native apps live on this device and are accessed through icons. These are the ones that you buy on the App Store or was it Android's store, the Google Play. I don't have an Android device, so I'd have to look it up to see what the name of the actual Google store is where you buy your apps for Android. Somebody in your responses tell me what the name of that thing is. But, you know, as you can see right here on this slide, native apps live on your device. Yeah, it's called Google Play. Look, I've got it right here on my slide. They're developed specifically for one platform, and the cool thing about that is that they can take advantage of all of the device's features. So when you're developing for the App Store, you're developing for Apple mobile devices, and you know exactly what the qualities and capabilities of that device are. Or those devices are. So your screen size, all of that stuff can take into account the qualities of those particular devices. Now, for Google Play, Android devices have a lot more variety to them, so you can't take quite as many things for granted when you develop for Android. You know, what are some of the stuff that your devices have? They have the camera, GPS, your accelerometer, the compass. You know, you don't have to look much further than Pokemon Go to think about taking advantage of some of the different capabilities that a mobile device has. And so from that itself, you can see how you can create a really successful and novel app by remembering to take into account all of the functionality that specific devices have. They can incorporate, of course, the different gestures that are involved in using these devices. So, you know, what kind of apps do you think of as being native apps? You know, certainly when any apps developed specifically by the company that makes your device. So Apple puts out a lot of specific software. You know, you can think of their word processing apps, their Apple Movies, you know, all of that kind of stuff that's made specifically by the manufacturer of your phones. But then, of course, there's just tons of other native apps that are out there. So then the second kind of specific apps that are made are called mobile web apps, okay? Web apps are actually not apps, okay? They're really websites. Okay, so what these will do is you'll navigate one time to the website using your browser, Safari or Chrome, whatever you happen to have on your device, and from there they'll have an option where you can save basically what's a link to that web page onto your desktop, and that'll allow you to just instantly navigate to that website, which makes it feel like an app. Okay. So this stuff started to happen. These sorts of web apps started to happen once HTML5 came out, which is just the latest version of HTML, which had a lot of new functionalities to it, which allowed developers to create websites that felt like apps. So you'll see a lot of these type of apps. Examples of web apps. If you ever go to Financial Times, it's a blog or it's kind of a webzine type of thing, and it looks like an app, but it's not. It's once you go to it the first time, it'll allow you to create a link and go back to read that app or their articles whenever you want to. And so it'll take advantage of things like horizontal swiping and functionalities like that. Pretty hard to distinguish mobile web apps from real apps when you're actually on the pages. But they don't work exactly the same way, and certainly developing them is a different process. There are also features that are available in HTML5, that you can use in these. I mean, HTML5 will allow you to do things like GPS or tap to call, and there's also a camera API inside of HTML5. So they can really make it feel like you're using a native app when you're not. You can argue that many apps, native or otherwise, don't take advantage of the extra features anyhow. So it's, not, the shortcomings of these apps aren't as obvious anymore because, it just depends on what you're trying to do. And maybe you feel more comfortable developing for the web, and so that's why you might make an app this way. Personally, I feel like native apps are a stronger choice to make, but sometimes it's difficult because you'll have to then make sure you develop your app for multiple platforms, whereas if you create one of these kinds of mobile web apps, then you can use that single page to create the functionalities you want across multiple platforms. They're also going to depend on access to the internet, of course, so that is a weakness in these kinds of apps. So that's mobile web apps. And then finally, there's something called a hybrid app, and hybrid apps are part native app, part web app, okay? Don't be tricked into calling them web apps. They're not web apps. Like native apps, they live in the App Store. Okay, you can get those on Google Play. You can get those on the App Store, and they take advantage of the device of the features on your device. But like web apps, they rely on HTML being rendered in a browser. So the browser is embedded within the app, so you don't have to go outside to Safari or Chrome outside of your app. Instead, they have a browser built right into the app. Okay, a lot of times companies will build hybrid apps as wrappers for an existing web page. So a store that's trying to sell you something. A good example that I've seen is Walgreens. Walgreens has a hybrid app, and essentially what it does is when you log into it, it allows you to interact with their web page that they've already created for the general public. That'll show you what's on sale at Walgreens, and different promotions that are going on there, and actually allow you to shop Walgreens from within the app. But essentially, you're looking at the same stuff that you'd be looking at if you logged into the Walgreens website through your web browser. Okay. So those are the three kinds of apps, and what I'm going to ask you to do this week for your assignment that'll be posted under assignments is I want you to look through either Google Play or the App Store and look at the top apps, look at what's selling, look at the promotional apps, look at the best-selling free and paid apps, and see if you can find some examples of a hybrid app, or of course of a native app. That'll be very easy to find there. Also, search through your experience and think of, have you ever used any mobile web apps that end up linking on your desktop or on the top of your phone that bring you to a site? I'd like you to kind of look for examples of these different kinds of apps and talk about the pros and cons that you think these different kinds of apps have in a Word essay. You could also put a T-chart on your essay if you want to help me kind of understand what you think the pros and cons of different apps are developed this way. So we're going over the different kinds of apps this week because it's important for you to understand this stuff as we begin to work towards the development side. And also it's important to understand, last week we talked about design and what designers are versus developers. And I'd like you to consider, what are some of the different effects that developing for these kinds of platforms would have on your design decisions. These are important considerations, and as we go through the course, we'll talk about them more directly. So go ahead and you can take a look at these definitions. The slide presentation, excuse me, that I'm showing you on the screen here is also going to be embedded over on the website on Blackboard, so you can read through these definitions, and the assignment will be under the assignments tab in the sidebar. You're also going to have an article to read this week, which is going to talk about different kinds of apps more in the context of their functionality, not on the mechanics of how they work, in terms of how I've described here, leveraging the internet versus developing native applications. But instead, the article that you're going to read this week is going to talk about what do the apps actually do? What kind of different categories of apps are there to develop? And I'm going to ask you to respond to that article as well. So great work last week. Let's keep it up this week. And I look forward to seeing your work.